Sorry, I'm still fiddling here trying to get what I wanted to do. I forgot to do something. And so
Okay.
then I opened another window and here we go. So anyway, if you can see it, there's my all sky camera. Can you see that? Yeah, it keeps blocking in and out.
Mm-mm.
And so it's not, I don't know how well it shows up. But anyway, it's not very big. So now, okay, now I want to share that guy.
Okay, we can see it, Steve.
Okay, finally, it's all there, right?
Yes.
Okay, so that in a sense is my all sky camera. And I will truthfully say, in a sense, I have two of them. This is one of them. I have another one that's out in my van. I didn't bring it in. And the main difference between the two of them is that the one in the van does have the typical kind of dome that you might think about it, the acrylic dome that kind of covers it. And then the one out in the van has, believe it or not, the same kind of camera that Dan had talked about before, the ASI 120, I think, yeah, MM. And so I've got it on that. And there's some differences in what you would expect to see. The by Aaron W. Morris, he's the guy who wrote the software for it. And the software is called Indie All Sky. And ultimately, it's on GitHub. And if you would go to that GitHub address, you can get it, eventually download it to your, I'm going to say Raspberry Pi because that's what I use for it. And you can build your own. It's kind of fun to do. Can I think of anything else about this light that you need to know? Yeah, look at that lens and see how tiny it is. Okay. And then look at that white ring right there. And then this camera happens to be a ZWO ASI 385 MC. There we go. So what's a all sky camera? It's kind of like a whole sky camera. And then I looked up on Google the definition, and it says magic words here like fisheye lens, and it says capture 180-degree horizon view, entire sky, and stuff like that. The truth is, you really don't have to make it 180. This all Indie All Sky software that the guy has would work for a whole lot smaller area. And so if you wanted it to be sort of even uh, a Milky Way camera, on a constellation level kind of thing, you could modify the lens that you put on it. And so you could do like large constellations or Milky Way or something like too. When you normally have one of these all sky cameras, they are generally headless. Everybody know what headless means? Anybody not know what headless means? Okay, we're
Don't
good.
really
Means
know.
without a head.
That's me. No, by head. Whoops, what? Got to go back one. Headless means that ultimately it's running all by itself. It doesn't have a monitor that you're connected up to. It doesn't have a keyboard and all that kind of stuff. It's just it's got power and it's running on its own. And so you have to find some way to interact with it. That's not like using a normal computer. You have to in a sense SSH or something like that into it to get a job done.
Like an
So anyway,
ASIR.
pardon?
Like an ASIR.
Yeah, like an ASI Air. There you go. They're usually operated unattended. They sometimes run 24/7. Sometimes people have them turn off, during the daytime because ultimately daytime pictures don't turn out very well. There's a lot of flare in the images from the sun and stuff like that.
Sorry,
But
sorry, Steve. You had asked if we saw the whole screen. Your screen's actually cut off. I didn't notice it until it starts displaying text. It's cut off on the right side.
on the right side, I can't see my right side either, but the reason for that.
Yeah, we see the resulting time, and that's as far as it goes.
Hmm. I know what's wrong. I just have to figure out what it's going to take to fix it.
The screen resolution, right?
That better?
Yeah, that's all of it.
Okay,
Sorry about that.
no, no, I mean, it would have been terrible. And by the way, this is the picture that was taken with my Indy All Sky camera. It was taken out at Danville, and I'll be talking about this kind of image and stuff like that. So anyway, when you use them, we usually use them to look at things like cloud cover. They do a real good job of showing you, light clouds that are passing through or something like that, which could be really helpful for any kind of imager because that will give you an excuse why your images didn't turn out well between 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning or something like that. You can use them to detect meteors. On my original time getting into these things years ago and trying to use them was actually to detect meteors during meteor showers. I didn't have much success. Looking back on it, I know now that it was because I was trying to use a Raspberry Pi 2 and it just wasn't powerful enough to get the job done. One of my current interests is now is to be able to detect satellites and look for satellites. Dan has proven this in the past that it's possible to see aurora even as far south as southern New Mexico, and you can see them. And so, if you have an aurora kind of plan, that would probably work. I don't think if you would pack it up and take it up to Yellowknife or wherever in the Northwest Territories, it's going to work very well, only because of power constraints. It will track time-lapse videos in a sense that rocket picture from earlier this past week. You might be able to do that kind of thing, but the truth is, I don't think it would do it very well because a lot of times when you're doing, the all sky kind of stuff, you have an exposure time that might be like 30 seconds, and I don't think that's going to do a very good job of being able to pick up the moving rocket and stuff. But definitely you can do comets, and I think comets would be very, very workable. Um, Ultimately, if it's headless, how do you see what you're getting? And the truth is, what a lot of times you will do is you will connect to it, and ultimately you will use a browser. A lot of times you can make the All Sky camera create a hotspot. You connect to the hotspot. It's running a web server software, HTTPD, and you connect to it and you interact with it, and it's just really, really wonderful. And we already know that Dan's running this, and normal people run them 24/7, and I'm not normal. Okay. And so I understand that, and it's kind of important that you know that because some of the problems that I've encountered are because I don't want to run it 24/7. I don't want to put it in a particular single location. I want to be able to take it with me wherever I go. And so this is what I want to do. I live in Chesterfield. The night sky is crappy. You can't see squat. Okay. I want to be able to go out to a dark site and I want to monitor the whole sky when I'm out there. So it means I want to be able to go to like Danville or I want to go to Whiteside or I want to drive to Colorado and go up to Grand Mesa or I want to go to Green Bank in West Virginia and set it up there. And in some of those cases, those offer some challenges to run one of these kind of guys. I'm interested in meteors and satellites and seeing in clouds, and I will be off the grid. So if you want to go out and you want to buy one of these, okay, they're now running about $1,000, and there are not a lot of companies that make them, only two or three. And one of them's called Starlight Express, and Starlight Express has got a couple of different versions, but Oculus Pro, and that's a picture of it right there. And I know absolutely nothing about it other than it's more than I wanted to spend. So I decided to build my own. And having said that, I'm going to call this homebrew units and the stuff that you need. And you may already own some of these parts. And if you already own the parts, then it's not going to be nearly as expensive. And so you're going to need a camera. And like I said, I had this ASI 385 NC floating around. I have not used it in the past year and a half because I bought a C Star, and the C Star is just so much easier to use. I said, and so this had been sitting in a drawer, and I said, I'm going to pull it out. And you need a lens, okay? And here's my lens right here. It is a fisheye lens, okay? And I will tell you, I'm going to, on each of these other kind of guys down here, I'm going to talk about them on other slides. But I have an itty bitty lens. It doesn't have to be itty bitty. And you need some way to make that lens fit onto the camera. And I will say that lens happens to be an M12 lens, and the camera has CWL cameras have T2 adapters, T2 threads, I think. And so I had to 3D print an adapter for it so I can screw that thing on. And you need some kind of housing to hold the thing. And I 3D printed that thing. And I will tell anybody who's interested that I used PETG and I didn't use PLA because PLA will melt in a hot car in the summertime from personal experience. And inside that housing, there's a computer and it's a Raspberry Pi. And you need cables, and I need two to make this work. One to connect a camera to the Raspberry Pi, and I also need to power it. And so, yeah, you need power. And a Raspberry Pi runs on 5 volt. And so you need to make sure you got a beefy enough 5 volt supply so that the Raspberry Pi runs. And you need the software. And like I said, the software is this thing that's called Indie All Sky. And for Bill and anybody else, SLAS is interested in something that's called the Global Meteor Network. And if you were to go to a URL that is right, did I click on it? Did it work? Oh, well, here we go. Make it happen. Well, it's supposed to happen. We're supposed to be looking at a web page right now, and it didn't happen, so we're going to forget that. But ultimately, they tell you how to make one. And so if you would get this, and after you get the next newsletter, look at that network, you can find some more information about how to make one of something like that. So when you use a camera, really any kind of camera is going to work. You could use a DSLR, anything down to a tiny, tiny 1/30 sensor or something like that. But the truth is, what you got to do is balance the lens with the camera. On mine, like I said, well, I'll talk more about that later. But ultimately, when you look at the camera, you got to decide if you want to use a rolling shutter or a manual shutter. And you would be a manual shutter if you use a DSLR. And the problem with that is you're going to take lots of images a night. And so after a relatively short period, you're probably going to wear out your camera's manual shutter. Okay. Ultimately, Indie is a good thing to have. It'll get stuff running a whole lot easier. One of the original versions of software out there was something that was called All Sky by Joaquim, somebody or other, and I forget his name. But his only worked with certain ZWO cameras, and other people didn't have that kind of thing. And so eventually, this guy Morris built in this thing that we're looking at now in the All Sky, and it's a whole lot easier to get stuff going. A truth is, the bigger the sensor in your camera, the bigger the camera's going to be, and probably the more it's going to cost. And you need to ask yourself, do you want cooling or not? And I'm thinking cooling would be useful in the summer in Missouri. Okay. And like I said, that's the camera that I'm going to use. When you talk about the lens, it's got to match the camera. Here's some different kind of lenses that I have around the house. This happens to be a Paling 8mm fisheye lens for a DSLR. That'll do 180 degrees. I've done it before. Okay. It'll work, but like I said, it's got a manual shutter, and so I wouldn't really be excited about using that kind of thing. Down here in the corner, this is like a 12mm, not a 12mm, an M12 lens, and this will also work. And this is kind of like the one that I'm using. And in the middle, this is a lens. It's a C-mount lens. And a C-mount lens is a bigger lens, and it's got a different screw. And so you would need a different adapter to put that guy on, or that guy on, or that guy on. Uh, Ultimately, the lens works with DSLR, ends up being a telephoto with a tiny CMOS, and you can read those, and that's no big deal. Whenever you do this, a lot of times, any part of the final image that's around the outside of the lens here, it's going to probably end up being just a little bitty fuzzy. It's not always going to be really, really sharp. Can I think of anything else? Nah, not on that. There you go. Sometimes you can buy an off the shelf housing. There are some out there on the internet. My one worry would be if you're building your own, will what you're building actually fit into it? And so I ended up 3D printing mine. And if you don't have a 3D printer, you can kind of design your own, and you can kind of, either find somebody to print it for you, or there are places where you can go on the internet to do it. A lot of times, if you were to look up in Google DIY all sky camera, a lot of the directions will show you how to do stuff with PVC pipe, just straight from the big box hardware store and stuff like that. And when you talk about acrylic domes, you can come and buy all sorts of different sizes at Amazon. And obviously, the purpose of the acrylic dome would be if you wanted to permanently mount yours somewhere like Dan does in New Mexico. I won't say anything nasty about that. Okay. So in terms of the computer that I use, okay, both at the Meteor Project Network and we both use a Raspberry Pi. I am now using a Raspberry Pi 4, and it's much, much faster. It's much easier than that 2 that I tried to originally do it with. Mine is a 4 GB one, and it cost about $75. I had it for other kinds of things, and I was done with the other things, and so I didn't mind taking it off that project and putting it on this one. I have a feeling anything that would, run Linux would work because, whoops, sorry about that. I can't guarantee it, but I think that it would. And then a Raspberry Pi doesn't have a real-time clock. And I got to tell you, that is an issue here if you're trying to use this thing off the grid. If you're on the grid, like Dan would be in New Mexico, you're connected to the internet and you can get your computer to run NTP. I assume that's Network Time Protocol. And ultimately, what it will do is every so often it'll go out and check a time server. It'll come back and keep resetting your time and resetting your time. But if you're out in the middle of nowhere, okay, and you don't have the right time, the problem is that the software says, oh, I'm not going to turn on and start imaging until dark. And if it's got the wrong time, it doesn't know when dark is. And so, that was one of the issues I had to face. And Bill, I would say when I was down at your place, that was the main issue that I had that night. Uh, and then it wouldn't hurt if you knew a little command line stuff with Linux, if you had just a little kind of familiarity with it. I know Dan and I go back to like last century in terms of when we started playing with Linux. I first started when it came on 20 floppies. There are a number of packages at work. Okay. If you go to Morris's website, if you scroll all the way down to the bottom of his page, he does have a whole lot of different software that you could use. I'm going to try this again. This is supposed to be Morris's site. And there we go. And so if you would scroll all the way down to his GitHub address,
We can only see your presentation screen.
okay, we'll forget that. That won't work. Sorry. So if you get this and you go to that site, you can scroll all the way down to the page and you could do that. Ultimately, it's not difficult to install his software, but I got to tell you, it is time consuming. Okay. Ultimately, you can configure it to beyond your words about what you put on the screen and what you want it to show and what you want the exposure kind of stuff to be. If you install the indie option, it will run any kind of indie kind of camera that's out there, which is really, really, really good. And ultimately, to install it, all you need to do is have a Raspberry Pi and you install Git and then you clone his GitHub address, and that's that one right below. And then you navigate to a directory and you run /setup.sh, and it'll take off and it'll run the software. Excuse me, it'll build the software. Building the software is kind of a pain in the sense that Raspberry Pis aren't particularly fast. And if you're trying to do it on a Raspberry 3, it's going to even be slower. But it has to literally build everything. And along the way, it'll stop and it'll ask you questions. A perfect example of a question it might ask is, do you want to use a Raspberry Pi camera or do you want to use an Indie camera? And if you're not paying attention to what's going on the screen when it's doing stuff, what ends up happening is that you walk away and you come back an hour later thinking it's done. And you only really went 5 minutes, and so it's a real that in itself is a little bit of pain. Ultimately, this is a picture that I took, okay, and that was out at Danville, and I screwed up a little bit. That's the North Star right there, and that's where it's supposed to be up here. And I forgot to say, I said, I know where North is. And so ultimately, when you run Indy All Sky, okay, it can produce this kind of stuff over here. It can give you a single frame, and this is a frame that was taken on 4/19 of 2026 at 5:05 in the morning. Okay. And you can it's a 30-second exposure. And I set the gain on the camera at 350. And truthfully, I said it's configurable. One of the things that you can configure is, how long you want the exposure time to be and what you want the gain to be. Another thing that you can do is that you can set it up and say, oh, that background's too bright. I want the background to be darker, or, and that kind of stuff. I will tell you that this is over here, this flat line that you see, that's the roof of my van. It's like it's too close. You could do time-lapse videos. Ah, crud, it did it again, previous.
Hmm.
There we go. And so there's an example of a time-lapse video. Can you see that?
Yeah.
That is a fireworks display.
Look at it.
Hmm?
It's a good fireworks display.
Yeah, that was a fireworks display over at 19 and 70. We don't know why it happened, but it
Is it at
happened.
that truck stop?
Right, that's where we think it was.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, the truth is I'm using 30-second exposures. As a result, whatever was going on with that fireworks, well, that's 30 seconds fireworks would be each frame. So you really, really don't see a whole lot.
Never seen anything like that out there before.
It surprised the daylights out of us. Andy was there.
Yeah. And I did notice you had a little bit of time where you had some clouds drift
Hmm. That was after two or
by.
something like that.
I'm just amazed that it actually picks up that sort of, in the dark like that.
Yeah. And so I was trying to get that to
Understand.
happen. And ultimately I really, really, like this. I mean, it shows a lot. And I guess the other thing that it shows when you look up here is you're going to see when Andy decided to leave when it gets really bright right here. Um, I will tell you that all of these things are configurable. I would think you would want the date and the time. I wanted the sidereal time. I'm not sure if I do anymore. Uh, you can tell the latitude, longitude. I do have it set up so that if it sees a satellite, okay, or if a satellite's supposed to be up, it's supposed to leave a little kind of message or something like that. You don't have to
Yeah.
do this. And there are thousands of satellites up there. What this does is it looks at a website and it is only going to look for 100 different satellites. It'll tell you about where the planets might be, the moon phase. It tells you about the various international space stations and stuff like that. And like I said, this is all configurable. So if you don't want it to have this information about the sun and the planets, it doesn't have to be there in that sort of stuff. And that will make a whole lot of sense when I show you the next frame. That's another thing that it will do. It will do a star trail, okay? But if you're doing star trails, then having it do stuff that changes on the screen is a real pain. So that's the case where you might want to turn something out. I did leave out the magic word time lapse video, and I don't know why I did. But the truth is, what that does is that you can uh, in this kind of thing, there's just time lapse video. If you know something is happening, like right now, and you notice the time and say, oh, I got to pick a time, 10 o'clock, a mini time lapse video is you say to it, oh, create a mini time lapse video, start at 10 o'clock, run for 10 minutes, and it'll give you just that little bitty segment. So you don't have to download it to a Windows computer and then get into it with a video editor and try to find the right frames and stuff like that. It will build that. Now, this kind of stuff doesn't go on all night long. What it does is it collects data all night long. And then after the sun is up, then it will go back and it will create the time lapses and all those other kinds of things. I don't know if I like that or not. It will do. That's called a kilogram, and it kind of gives you an idea of the light levels at night. And this is what they call a 3D landscape. And in some ways, that's kind of cool. Though it probably would work better if you had the software that would be able to, wrap it around in 360. There used to be something they called PT GUI that would make that happen. If you want to do this kind of stuff, what do you need? Well, you need the stuff from above. You need the camera, and you need the lens, and the adapter, and the housing, the Raspberry Pi. And then you would need a micro SD card for the Raspberry Pi. And I would truthfully say a 64 gigabyte one is plenty in terms of size. You can probably get away with a 32 one too. And you need a good 5-volt power supply for the Raspberry Pi. If you're running it like where Dan does and you got a plug in the wall, great. If you're running it out in the middle of nowhere, you can run it off a power bank. Okay, but be a little careful about the wires that you choose. And then if you're running it like I am, you need something probably to mount it on. A tripod would be good. I thought about putting it on the top of my van, and I thought, no, I'm going to be walking on a van, so that's probably not going to be a very good idea. I mentioned it was configurable. There is, once you get into it, you can, and like I said, you connected this using a browser, and then there's a configuration button, and these are all the things that you can configure. Information about the camera, ultimately, if you have it set up where it could do either a Raspberry Pi camera or an Indie camera, you go in here, and this is where you would set the particular one that you wanted to do. If you chose to be able to run that all sky camera, but do it with different cameras itself. You can say, oh, we'll use the ASI 120 or use the this or that. About the image is going to be like the image size and what it's going to take to get it to get it centered on the screen. Whether or not you want to take daytime images or nighttime images, you want to whatever you want to do. Literally 100 things there. The overlays are the things that I put on the screen that would be like the satellite kind of information, the planets and stuff. You can turn them on, turn them off. You can change where you're going to put them. If you want them in different places, that's where you go to deal with that. It'll give you information about here about how you want to deal with the time lapse and I don't know how to describe it. If you're going to be like Dan and you're going to set it up in one place, you set location, you leave it alone, it's great. If on the other hand, if you're going to be like me and you're going to drive all over creation, you need to be able to change where the thing's set up. So that's where you change that. And then a lot of the stuff here, I don't necessarily know what it's going to do because I haven't played with it. I do know supposedly it's able to create a video that's supposedly YouTube compatible. I don't ever do that kind of stuff. And this is where you can turn on the satellite tracking if you do that kind of thing. Once you make a change under one of the sub menus here, then you have to reload it. And that usually takes about a minute. And then it'll go ahead and it'll update it. And so that works pretty well. And again, it's all configured with web browser. To set it up and to do it, well, obviously, first you need to get the Raspberry Pi getting and going. So you need to get your micro SD card and you need to install the Raspberry Pi operating system on that. Ultimately, go to the Raspberry Pi site and you will download a program, and that program will then you run it and it will say, oh, put the micro SD card in your laptop or your computer or however you want to do it and what kind of install you want to do. And there are a variety of different Raspberry Pi OSs as a possibility. And you just click it. The directions are on the site. They work great. You shouldn't have any problem. That will probably take maybe 5 to 10 minutes to do. Okay, then you need to decide how you're going to interact with your Raspberry Pi. And by that, I mean direct connect, hook up your monitor, hook up your keyboard, hook up your mouse, that kind of stuff. Or if you're going to try to SSH into it or whatever like that, but then get it started. I see your SD card is in the Raspberry Pi and it's going to run. And I would recommend getting VNC running. I think that's a really nice thing to go. And then configure your Raspberry Pi to create a hotspot. I think that's kind of an important kind of concern. Uh, if you're going to leave it in a particular location, you don't necessarily need to wire an Ethernet to it. But I mean, ultimately, the problems that I encountered, I found an Ethernet cable was the easiest solution to get those things fixed. Then you go to Mars's website and you figure out what it takes to install. And again, it's an easy install. It's on that main page that I wasn't able to show you. And there, go for it. There's no real-time clock. That was a problem. Uh, I have to set the time because I can't connect to NTP. I'll show you how to do that in the morning. Excuse me, in a minute. And when the time is off, it won't start and stop. It's got to know the right time.
Hey, Steve,
Yes,
won't your Raspberry Pi take a GPS module?
it could, but I don't have one. And truthfully, the GPS module is such that, well, I can't. I'm holding up. You can't see. Well, yes, you can. Well, now you can. There you go. Now you can see it. My box here is nice, and I like this. And any kind of thing like that, any kind of hat to put in there,
Yeah.
is going to make the box a whole lot bigger and uglier.
I got you.
I thought
I
they,
work.
I
I
was
use
gonna
those.
say, sorry, I thought they actually sold like a $5 real-time clock that you
Yeah,
just
I
plugged
do,
into
and
the
I've got a
board.
couple of them, and they used to run on my Raspberry Pi 3s, but I can't get them to run on my Raspberry Pi 4.
Huh.
Which frustrated me no end. And I think I did mention that, and that led to frustration when I was that night it was at Bill's, and that was another frustration because it was supposed to work and it wasn't working, and it was
Yeah.
I was that night relying on the real time clock. They're only $5.
Yeah,
I
I
got two
know.
of them, but neither of them run on my Raspberry Pi 4. I don't remember if I did that slide or not. I don't want to back up one. There you go. So anyway, time is critical. If you don't have the right time, you're not going to get what you expect you're going to get. Okay, I've tried to connect to my Raspberry Pi off grid. This has led to a set of frustrations and one, two, three times, and me driving about 500 miles. Okay, having said that, I've tried to have the Raspberry Pi create a hotspot. Yes, it works. It's always works in my house. It's wonderful when it's in my house. But when I drive 150 miles, or excuse me, 75 miles out to the country, and then I try to hook the thing up, it doesn't always create a hotspot that I can connect to. And by connecting to, what I mean is that I use a tablet, a Samsung tablet, and I can usually connect to the hotspot on the Raspberry Pi, but it always hasn't worked. So,
Mm.
and the YouTube is your friend because there are directions on the internet on YouTube about how to create the hotspot. And then ultimately, even in the All Sky software, there's a script where you can run it, and it's supposed to create a hotspot, but it didn't for mine, so I had to go back to YouTube. Um, I have a phone. It's a Verizon phone. I pay so that it can create a hotspot. And I thought, oh, well, I can make this work. And then I drove out to Danville, and it turns out I didn't have a good enough signal for my cell phone at Danville. And the first thing I tried to do when I created the hotspot at Danville is it had to go out and talk to Verizon and say, am I authorized to make a hotspot? And since I couldn't connect, I couldn't connect. It's
Oh
pissed.
man.
I was pissed. And then finally, the way that finally works, and I agree, it works. Run a damn wire. Okay. And if I run a wire between my tablet and the Raspberry Pi that's in the L Sky, it's great. It's fast. It's foolproof. There's no problem. And so I set everything up. I do it. I set whatever I have to set, and then I get rid of the Ethernet cable, and I'm done for the night. Okay.
Hey, Steve, I have an NTP server that I got off of Amazon
Uh-huh.
that I paid $80 for that I use with my ham radio, but it has a RJ45 port for the Ethernet. It runs on from 6 to 28 volts. So you can choose how much power, and then it comes with a GPS antenna, so it gets the time directly from the GPS, and you can and it the the IP address is a dedicated IP address of 192.168.0.100. So you set that in your Raspberry Pi, which is running Linux, as the time server at that address, and then to get the time from the satellite.
Okay. How much did you say it was?
$80.
Oh, I'm cheap. Sorry. Thank you for telling me.
I'll send you a link in an email.
Okay. I'm sorry. Seasonal allergies are sprouting up. Anybody else seasonal allergy being miserable?
Got seasonal COVID.
What I need to do when I'm out there in the field. Let's pretend I'm out at Danville. Okay. It's still light. Okay. Which is an important concern. I set up my tripod and I'll screw this thing on top of, I'll screw this guy I'll screw this, it didn't show up. I screw that thing on top of it. And then I forget to do this sometimes, but it's best if I line north with the compass. And the truth, the way that I make that happen is, can you see that? You know where the wires are here? What I end up doing is I made sure that these are in the same direction. And I know that this is the top of the camera. And so I align this to north. Okay. And so that kind of helps. Then I'll connect it to power and I'll boot to Raspberry Pi, and it'll take 30 seconds to boot or something like that. And then hopefully, if I'm lucky, okay, I will connect the tablet to the hotspot that the Raspberry Pi will make. Okay. And that hotspot is got an address down here at the bottom. 10, that's my son calling. We're going to ignore the phone call. 104201. And then I'll use SSH to connect the, to set the date and time. If I can't connect the tablet hotspot, that's where the Ethernet cable is, and it still goes to that same address and it'll work. And then ultimately, to set the date time, there's that sudo command, and it's easy to type in. And then I will connect with the browser on my tablet and go to that address to set the time and update. And at that point, it's like, there it is on the screen, Indy All Sky running the same stuff that you saw in the video that I did back at the beginning here that you saw. And so it works, and it's good, and it's cool, and it shows fireworks up on Highway 19. There is a huge, huge, huge cloudy night thread that was originally started on August 22nd back in 2021. And there's the address, but just go to Cloudy Nights and search Indy All Sky. And if you do that, I bet you that that thing is 60 pages long or something like that. And it's good, and people tell how they've used it, and they give examples of the different configuration files that they use. And the configuration files are things that put that stuff around the window, like the planets where they are and the times and all that sort of stuff. So it's really, really, really good. I like this thing. It's foolproof out in the field now. And it's fun when I come home in the morning. Oh, and I should explain. In the when I go out, I spend the night out. I sleep in my minivan. Okay. So on the way home during the daytime, I don't unplug it from the power bank. I let the thing run in the car because it needs that time to be able to make the videos and do all the other stuff it's going to do. I come home and then I will look at the videos and then I will be very, very happy with them. I think I explained that. Now let me get out of there and go back to there. Sorry. Eyes are burning.
Anybody there?
I'm here.
Uh,
I'm sorry, my eyes are dying.
no, sorry.
Oh, not your fault.
Well, I didn't know if my machine hung up or not.
Okay. So who should get an all sky camera? And I'm going to say, in some silly ways, anybody who wants to go out and know what's really, really going on. I mean, Dan's got one in New Mexico. And then I'll technically say, yeah, there's one at Bromelsick Park, sorta. Okay. If you were to go to ASEM's webpage, if you prowl around an ASEM's webpage, it'll say something like conditions at Bromelsick now, and you go to it, and it'll hint at there's this all sky camera, but it can't find a camera, and I don't think the page has been updated for like 3 years or something like that. In truth, I think it would be a good idea to have something like this out at Bromelsick Park. Now, not necessarily like mine without the dome, but one with the dome I think would be a good idea. Dan said last week, put out a post, what do we need out of Bromelsick? And in truth, I think one of those would be, a wise kind of thing to have. Um, if you're a serious imager, I think it would be good because you might want to know as you're imaging throughout the course of the night, exactly what are those sky conditions? You saw those clouds come through on that video that I had, and it would be nice to kind of know those things. I would think if you do the really, really, really good work. Um, I like it. I don't know what else to say. Anybody need to know anything?
The moon affect the overall
Yeah. Oh, I
image
didn't,
because
and
it's
I will
bright.
mention that and say one of the things that can be configured is it does have a setting for what happens if the moon is up. And so ultimately, what it can do, what it does as a default, is it cuts back the exposure, cuts back the gain, and cuts back the brightness of the background. And so it makes things more, I'll say more believable. But yeah, you're not going to be able to see as deeply. You wouldn't be able to see DSOs or something like that nearly as well.
Hey Steve, thanks. This is great. This was great. I was really hoping you'd do this. I'm excited to put one out at my site.
You need one.
I do. Um, and so you mentioned that the Raspberry Pis don't have a real-time clock. I know the Raspberry 5, it's super easy to, they have two pins that's set up for super time clock or clock. There's this little clock module that you buy that has a battery backup. You just plug it on those two pins and it goes. So I did that on my home automation stuff and that worked great.
How much is the five?
How much is what?
How much is the five? The Raspberry 5?
Oh, I don't remember what I paid.
125 maybe?
125?
You'd
I
have to
think
look them
maybe.
up because they keep raising the prices because the memory keeps going up.
Oh.
I thought I paid $8 for 4 GB, but I don't remember. It was a while ago. It was sitting in my basement, so it was. But I used it for home automation. But yeah, I'm anxious to do this.
Maybe. Well.
Well, like I said, I'm pretty sure they had the real-time clocks for the fours too. I'm not sure. Um,
E- I think they did. I don't know. I've got a 4 downstairs. I can go look, but I know with the 3 you could connect a real-time clock. It wasn't as convenient. You
Oh
had
no,
to
I
do
can
through the
put the Raspberry.
GPIO.
I can put a real time clock on my 3, or I can put it on my 4. I just can't get it to work on the 4.
yeah.
Oh, on the
Okay.
5, like I say, I think there's two dedicated pins. You just connect it in and you go.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's
I
a
was just
sweet
gonna
feeling.
Don't
I was
buy
just
it
gonna
there.
mention for powering them. They sell if you're putting it somewhere outside or whatever permanently. TP Link and several others, they sell these PoE type injectors.
Hmm.
Oh
Only
yeah,
they sell one with variable output, and that's what we use. That you can output 48 volts for phones and stuff, but you can also output 12 volts or 5 volts or whatever, and that's what we use. So you can just run an Ethernet cable and power it.